She set the folder on the walnut table and leveled her gaze at the smirking CEO. "I built this company long before you learned to sign your name," she said, then fired him on the spot, the janitor's badge trading places with absolute power. In the stunned silence that followed, every suit finally understood the broom lady had just swept the throne clean. They called her Miss Loretta. Not Mrs. Monroe. Not Ms. Loretta like you'd say with respect. Just Miss Loretta the janitor. The overnight help. She clocked in at 10:00 p.m. sharp every night at Pinnacle West Logistics in St. Louis, Missouri, pushing a battered cleaning cart down marble-tiled hallways that shone in the dark like polished teeth. Her uniform, a slate gray smock with her name stitched in cursive above the chest pocket, was ironed neat even if the stitching had faded. Her shoes were orthopedic, cracked at the soles, but silent as she swept past the frosted glass doors of conference rooms she wasn't supposed to exist in. For 16 years, she'd cleaned up after people who didn't know her name, didn't ask, didn't care. The young executives with gelled hair and empty coffee cups would stride past her like she was a piece of furniture. Others, middle-aged, middle management types, would grunt if she was in the way, sometimes mumble an order, like she worked for them directly. She didn't. She worked for the building, technically, but the building used to be hers. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Loretta Monroe had once sat at the kitchen table with her husband Raymond, sketching out what would become Pinnacle West Logistics. Back when the whole operation was just a scribbled dream on a diner napkin and a shoebox full of Post-it notes. Raymond was the voice, the dreamer, the one who could walk into any room and make people believe they were part of something big, something lasting. Loretta was the mind. She managed the spreadsheets, spotted the flaws, kept the operation lean. They'd invested everything, her inheritance, Raymond's severance, even a life insurance policy her mother left behind. Then Raymond brought in his old college roommate, Gerald Cobb, slick, sharp-talking, always in a suit too expensive for what he earned. Gerald helped build connections, bring in seed capital, find the first 3 freight contracts that put Pinnacle West on the map. And for a while it worked, until the accident. It was a rainy Sunday night on I-55. Raymond was driving back from a meeting in Memphis when a semi drifted over the line and clipped his back tire. The car rolled twice. He didn't make it. The funeral was quiet, small. Loretta didn't even recognize half the men who shook her hand with forced sympathy and corporate smiles. Gerald gave the eulogy, polished, heartless. He called Raymond a visionary, a builder, a friend, but never once mentioned Loretta. 3 weeks later, she was locked out of the financial files. Then came the documents, legal notices, shifting ownership, signing powers, decisions she never agreed to. She was erased, quietly, like she'd never been there. Gerald assumed she'd vanish. Maybe marry again. Maybe find some small bookkeeping job. Maybe fade into grief and memory. But Loretta Monroe didn't vanish. She changed her name, went by Loretta Banks, updated her address, cut her hair, bought a cheap used Honda, waited 2 years. Then one day she saw a flyer pinned to the corkboard at the Mid-City laundromat. Now hiring overnight custodial staff, Pinnacle West Logistics. She circled it, drove down to the address listed, walked into the back loading dock wearing a windbreaker and sneakers. The HR girl looked at her ID for 5 seconds, asked 2 questions, and handed her a uniform. She'd been there ever since. 16 years. 16 years of scrubbing the corners no one noticed. Of cleaning the grime off elevator buttons and listening, really listening to the late-night conversations of managers who thought janitors were deaf. She heard it all, how HR faked safety reports to keep insurance costs down, how bonuses were padded, how drivers got penalized for calling in sick. How one of the floor supervisors, Ronnie with the gold wristwatch, would sit in his office watching YouTube while warehouse staff busted their backs moving pallets by hand. She kept a little notebook tucked into the side pouch of her cart. Nothing flashy, just names, dates, quotes. One time, a young marketing guy left a full taco container on top of a recycling bin, not inside it, just sitting there like it was beneath him to bend down. Loretta picked it up, wiped the counter, said nothing. The next day, he spilled soda on the hallway carpet and barked at her to clean it before the regional team arrived. She smiled, wiped it, logged the time. She wasn't bitter. Not at first. It started like an ember, a quiet ache behind the ribs, a slow-growing awareness that the place her husband dreamed into life had become something monstrous. Cold, loud, shiny on the outside and rotting at the roots. But she kept working, one foot in front of the other, one wipe of the table, one sweep of the hallway, always listening. A few of the younger staff, the temps, the part-timers were kind. They said thank you. Some offered a smile. But the core culture of the building was clear: you're either above the glass or beneath the broom. And everyone beneath knew not to speak unless spoken to. One night around 2:09 a.m., Loretta paused in the west break room, rubbing the knot in her back. She heard voices carrying from the stairwell. She recognized them: Marcus Dillard, the new CEO, just 39, and already on his second Porsche, and his assistant Rachel, laughing like they were the only ones in the world. "She's still here?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp, amused. "Who?" Rachel asked. "The janitor." "You know Miss Whatever, the old one. She's like a walking ghost." Rachel giggled. "Yeah, I've seen her. Doesn't talk much." "Doesn't need to," Marcus said. "She probably doesn't even hear us. Long as she gets the floors clean." Loretta didn't move, just stood in the dark, hidden behind a vending machine, the same place she'd stood 100 times before. But something had shifted. The ember inside her had turned, not into anger, into clarity. These people didn't just ignore her. They had forgotten she was even human, and the building, her building, had become a mirror of that arrogance. Then came Janice. Janice was a second-shift cleaner, younger than Loretta. Kind eyes, 2 kids at home. Her daughter Latrice had gone in for a surgery, appendicitis emergency, and Janice had asked to swap shifts. Not take a day off, just swap. Management said no. Not enough coverage, they claimed, though Loretta knew the office had been dead quiet that whole week. Janice showed up to work anyway, eyes puffy, shoulders tight, said nothing, just grabbed her mop and kept moving. That was the moment. Loretta didn't say anything out loud, didn't clench her fists or call anyone out. She just stood in the janitor locker room for 5 extra minutes that night, staring at her own reflection in the scratched-up mirror. She was older now. Her hair was mostly gray. Her hands were rough, but her eyes, they were steady, focused, alive. She walked out, not slower or faster, just steadier. Each step deliberate, each hallway familiar. And somewhere deep in her pocket, her phone buzzed once. It was a message from her attorney. Just one line. "We're ready when you are." Loretta didn't reply, just slid the phone back into her pocket and kept walking. She still had work to do, but this time she wasn't walking as a custodian. She was walking as the woman who built the building, and no one saw her coming. Loretta's steps echoed in the dim hallway long after the phone was back in her pocket. The message, "We're ready when you are," hadn't startled her. It had steadied her, like the slow clink of a key sliding into a lock after years of waiting to hear the right click. She didn't change her route that night, didn't move faster or slower. She still cleaned the corner of the 5th-floor corridor that always seemed to gather dust no matter how many times she swept it. She still wiped the smudged fingerprints off the stainless steel microwave that none of the mid-managers ever cleaned after they reheated their overstuffed burritos. She still paused at the end of her shift in the empty employee break room, where a corkboard held a faded photo from the early days: Pinnacle West's first delivery truck parked crooked in front of a rented trailer office. Raymond had been in that photo. So had Gerald. Loretta had taken it, but they never printed her name. The next day it happened. Loretta was walking her cart past the executive floor, same as always when she saw it. A paper plate sitting dead in the center of the hallway. On it, a mostly eaten slice of birthday cake, frosting melting into a pale pink mess, a plastic fork stabbed into the center like a joke, chocolate streaks on the carpet, and something in her gut said it wasn't an accident. She bent down to pick it up slowly, methodically, like she always did when a voice called out from down the hall. "You missed a spot." Loretta didn't even have to look. She already knew who it was: Marcus Dillard. 39 years old, full of ambition, empty of grace. The CEO and title only, whose biggest skill was making mediocre ideas sound urgent in quarterly memos. She straightened up slowly, holding the plate in one gloved hand, mop handle in the other. Marcus stood at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, blazer unbuttoned like he was on break from a GQ photo shoot. He walked toward her, smirking. "Right there," he said, pointing to a perfectly clean patch of tile. "You really ought to catch these things. We've got clients coming in." Loretta didn't flinch. "Excuse me," she said. Marcus chuckled. Oh, come on. Don't take it personal. I'm just saying if I paid you more, maybe you'd see dirt before I do. She blinked. Once. No expression. Just one breath in, one breath out. I'll make sure it's spotless, she said calmly. Good, he said. That's what I like to hear. And then he turned and walked off satisfied. Loretta stood in silence for several more seconds, not out of shock, not out of anger, out of confirmation. Everything she needed to know about the man running her company was summed up in that smirk, that joke, that cake on the carpet. That night, she didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, she waited until the building was quiet, really quiet. Midnight. She changed out of her uniform in the janitor's locker room and put on a dark zip-up hoodie, old jeans, and gloves that weren't for cleaning. Then she retrieved something from the back of her locker, a small lanyard with an ID badge that didn't belong to her. It belonged to a junior finance manager named Keith Barlow, who once left it on the edge of a sink while washing his hands. Loretta had slipped it into her pocket months ago, just in case. She moved silently, no cart this time, just a phone and a plan. The records room was on the 6th floor. Access was badge controlled after hours, but the badge in her hand beeped green without hesitation. Inside rows of locked cabinets lined the walls, but the real gold was in the digital terminal tucked into the corner. Loretta sat down, opened the network, and began printing. Not all of it, just enough. Budget reports from the last 4 quarters, internal memos about staffing cuts, bonus logs. She took photos of files she couldn't print, forwarded herself emails that would later be transferred to a secure drive. And then she found it, the payout summary. Marcus Dillard had approved a $60,000 quarterly bonus for strategic leadership during a market contraction while freezing overtime for warehouse workers and denying hazard pay during a regional flood. In the same quarter, janitorial staff had their uniforms downgraded to single replacements and first aid kits were marked for departmental consolidation. She sat back in the chair for a second, staring at the screen. Not because she was surprised, because it had finally crossed the line into something she could carry into battle. She sent everything to Angela. Subject line, it's time. Then she slipped out the same way she came in. 2 days later, Loretta walked into the building just before 10 a.m. Not for her shift, but for the meeting. No smock, no gloves, just a navy blue blazer, a charcoal blouse, and slacks that pressed a clean crease all the way down to her black flats. She carried no mop, just a leather folder. The security guard at the front desk blinked at her in confusion, but didn't stop her. The elevator doors opened to the 8th floor. The boardroom was already in session. 12 seats around a walnut conference table. Marcus stood at the head, gesturing with a cup of coffee in hand, like he was explaining a strategy he barely understood. Gerald Cobb sat 2 chairs over, older now, but still slick, still pretending he owned something he stole. When Loretta entered, nobody said anything at first. Maybe they thought she was lost, or catering, or maintenance delivering something. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Sorry, miss. We're in a private meeting here. Maintenance is after hours. Loretta didn't blink. I'm not here for maintenance. A second later, the door opened behind her. Angela Price stepped in professional calm, with a slim briefcase in her grip. Good morning, she said. I'm Angela Price, legal counsel for Mrs. Loretta Monroe, co-founder and majority shareholder of Pinnacle West Logistics. The room froze. Marcus blinked, then let out a single scoff. This is what a prank. Loretta stepped forward, placed the folder on the table, and opened it slowly. Inside, signed investment contracts, notarized transfer documents, and a binding shareholder agreement that had never been voided. Gerald shifted in his chair like the room had just gotten smaller. You remember these, don't you, Gerald? Loretta said quietly. You helped draft them. Gerald didn't speak. Marcus started to stand, blustering. This is ridiculous. She's a janitor. She's the company, Angela said. And under the terms of these agreements, Mrs. Monroe is invoking a vote of no confidence in the current CEO effective immediately. Marcus's voice cracked. You can't do that. She already did, Angela said. Then she handed termination notices to each board member, neatly stacked. Security entered a minute later. They didn't ask questions. Just waited. Marcus grabbed his phone, his pride, and stormed out. Gerald followed him, muttering curses under his breath. Loretta stood at the head of the table now looking at faces that weren't sure whether to panic or applaud. "I'm not here to make speeches," she said, "but I am here to take back what was mine. Not out of vengeance, but out of duty. Because this company was built to mean something, and it's time we remember what that was." The janitor had become the witness, and now the judge, and not a single person had seen it coming. The room was still buzzing with the aftershock of Marcus Dillard being escorted out, when Loretta slowly gathered her folder, nodded at Angela, and stepped out of the boardroom. There was no applause, no grand declaration, just the quiet echo of reality shifting under polished floors. Gerald Cobb hadn't said a word as she left. He just stared down at the walnut table he once bragged about importing, like he finally saw the cracks in it, cracks that had always been there just covered with gloss. Loretta didn't linger. She walked past the same glass panels where her reflection had blurred for years, past the wall-mounted Employee of the Month plaques where her name had never appeared, past the break room fridge where no one ever asked if she had a place to sit. She didn't pause to savor the moment, because this wasn't the finish line. It was the start of real work. By 7:30 the next morning, Loretta was back not as janitor, not as ghost, but as the owner. She parked in the executive lot for the first time. The spot was wide-shaded close to the elevator, but it felt foreign, too quiet, too polished. As she stepped out of her car, she saw an overnight crew member, Deshawn, finishing up trash collection near the dock. He straightened when he saw her. "Miss Loretta?" he asked, confused. She smiled. "Just Loretta now." He stood there unsure, then nodded, like he was still figuring out what was real. She stepped into the building wearing a navy pantsuit and low heels. Not flashy, not expensive, but clean and deliberate. The front desk receptionist, Tasha, blinked hard and whispered, "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning, Tasha," Loretta replied. "How's your son doing in school?" Tasha froze. He's doing okay. How'd you—" "I listen," Loretta said gently. "Always have." She took the elevator to the 6th floor and sat behind the desk that once belonged to Marcus. She didn't like the office. It smelled like expensive cologne and wasted time, but it would do for now. She didn't look out the window. She pulled a yellow legal pad from her bag and started writing. At 10:00 a.m., she walked into the largest conference space in the building, not the boardroom, but the main floor meeting hall, and waited. Word had already spread. She didn't need to send invites. They came anyway. Drivers, warehouse coordinators, night shift crews, administrative assistants, HR staff, dozens of them. Some curious, some skeptical, some still clutching their phones like this might be a prank. She didn't use a mic, just her voice. "I want to start by saying thank you," Loretta said, her tone even and unshaken. "Most of you never knew who I was. You didn't need to, because your work spoke louder than any title in this building ever did. The room was still. I'm not here to play boss. I'm here to rebuild, and I'm not doing it alone. I've listened for 16 years, to your frustrations, to your fears, to your ideas, quietly. But now I want to hear them out loud." A few people exchanged glances. A man in the back, one of the forklift drivers, raised a tentative hand. "Does this mean we get overtime back?" "Yes," Loretta said. "And back pay for the last 2 quarters. You'll see it on Friday's check." Murmurs spread. Then Janice stood up, same Janice who'd been denied time off for her daughter's surgery. "And health coverage. It's been cut every year since I got here." Loretta nodded. "We're already reviewing providers, and every employee will have a say in what coverage we choose. No more boardroom decisions about your bodies." The air in the room shifted, not with excitement, with disbelief, with hope trying to poke its head above years of silence. Someone else spoke. "What about the people who were fired unfairly?" "Every termination from the last decade is under review," Loretta replied. "If you were let go for asking questions, for reporting issues, for speaking up, we'll make it right. Maybe not every case will end in rehiring, but everyone will get a chance to be heard." A long pause followed, and then soft clapping. Not a cheer, just a ripple of acknowledgement that something real had started. Loretta ended the meeting with one line: "If you speak, I will listen. And if you work, you will be respected." But not everyone welcomed her back with open arms. By noon, 3 senior directors had already filed complaints about procedural concerns and leadership gaps. One of them, a silver-haired VP named Randall, walked into her office without knocking. "You really think this is going to work?" he asked, arms crossed. "You've never run a company of this scale. It's not a janitor's closet anymore." Loretta looked up from her desk. "I scaled my grief into silence for 16 years. I think I can handle your spreadsheets." He didn't have a comeback. She called security on him anyway. Not to kick him out, just to remind him who held the keys now. Over the next few weeks, the changes came fast. She promoted a warehouse coordinator named Lynette James to head of operations, a woman who'd been passed over 4 times by men with less experience. She hired an outside auditing firm to comb through every vendor contract signed in the last 8 years. She cut the bloated bonuses, reinstated hazard pay, and she brought back the annual Employee Appreciation Day that had mysteriously disappeared from the budget 5 years ago. She ate lunch in the break room, walked the loading dock without an entourage. She sat with drivers, listened to payroll processors, hugged people she used to sweep next to. But one question never stopped coming in hushed tones behind her back sometimes, even in curious emails. Why did she wait so long? Why 16 years? Why not fight sooner? Why not sue? Why not scream? She never got defensive. She just folded her hands, leaned back in her chair, and said the same thing every time. Because you don't strike until the fruit is rotten enough to fall. She hadn't waited out of fear. She'd waited for proof. She let the rot rise to the surface so no one could deny it. If she had come in early, they would have called her bitter, said she was grieving, said she was just causing trouble. But 16 years of quiet made her undeniable. One afternoon, she walked down the same hallway where Marcus had once pointed out an invisible stain. The same hallway where that slice of birthday cake had mocked her place in the world. She stopped in the middle of it now, keys in her hand, not a single crumb on the floor. An intern walked by, eyes wide, then paused awkwardly. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Monroe," he said nervously. She smiled. "Just Loretta." That Friday, she hosted a small gathering in the parking lot. No DJ, no banners, just food trucks, folding chairs, and people who had stories to tell. Deshaun raised his soda and said to the ones they never saw coming. Loretta raised hers back, to the ones who built the building. And for the first time in 16 years, she felt seen, not for what she used to clean, but for what she never stopped protecting. Sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the most power. Loretta Monroe walked the halls of Pinnacle West Logistics for 16 years without anyone truly seeing her. To most, she was just Miss Loretta the janitor, the one who picked up after them, who made the floor shine, who smiled without making waves. But beneath that quiet presence was a woman who had built the very foundation they walked on, literally and legally. And she waited. Not because she was weak, but because she was wise. The lesson here is this: never underestimate someone because of their uniform, their silence, or where you think they stand on the ladder. Respect should never be tied to job titles or corner offices. Loretta's story reminds us that dignity lives in quiet work, in patience, and in resilience. The ones you overlook may be the ones who made it all possible, and the ones with the power to change everything when the time comes. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. She didn't retaliate in anger. She responded with proof. She didn't crash through the door. She waited until it was hers to open. To those of you listening right now who've ever felt ignored, disrespected, or invisible in your workplace or community, your worth is not defined by recognition. It is defined by your character, your perseverance, and your purpose. Keep going, keep watching, keep receipts, because when the time comes, your voice and your actions can speak louder than all the noise combined. And to those who hold power, may Loretta's story be a reminder: power is not meant to be a pedestal. It's a responsibility, one that should uplift others, not silence them. From all of us here at US Justice Story, thank you for watching. If this story made you stop and think even for a moment, we invite you to share it, because there are Lorettas everywhere, in warehouses, in schools, in hospitals, in your own neighborhood. And the more we see them, honor them, and listen to them, the more justice we bring to our everyday lives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more stories that shine a light on the unseen, the unheard, and the underestimated. Until next time, stay aware, stay kind, and never stop standing up for what's right.